Good morning. My name's Julia Peyton-Jones, and this morning I'm going to have tea with Annabelle Selldorf, who is the principal of Selldorf Architects, a 70-person architectural design practice that she founded in New York City in 1988. The firm creates public and private spaces that manifest a clear and modern sensibility.
I can't hear you. Sound is gone.
She's a fellow of the American Institute of Architects and serves on the board of the Architectural League in New York, the World Monuments Fund, the Chinati Foundation, and the Center for Curatorial Studies at Bard College. In 2016, she received the AIA New York Medal of Honor and was elected to the American Academy of Arts and Letters. Can you hear me now?
Now I can hear you.
Thank the Lord. I'm so sorry. I think it was probably my hands-free that I hadn't plugged in properly. Thank you so much.
I get very hectic because I have those earphones in and then it's like, since I'm such a technophobe.
Us both. Here we are on this Saturday morning. It's spectacularly early for you, so I'm really sorry that that to be waking you up at this ungodly hour. But I just want to quickly run through the intro again, because I think maybe some of the people who joined us hadn't heard it. But briefly, you're the principal of Selldorf Architects, a 70-person architectural design practice that you founded in 1988. The firm creates public and private spaces that manifest a clear and modern sensibility that really has as its focus an enduring impact. That's one of the things that you focus on. Clients are wide, but almost exclusively in the arts, either museums or collectors or indeed commercial galleries. The Frick Collection, for example, the Museum of Contemporary Art San Diego, the Neue Galerie New York, Steinway and Sons, who are cultural but not in the visual arts or architecture, the Rowe and Fries Masters. Additionally, you've designed for David Zwerner, Hauser and Wirth, Galerie Thaddeus Ropac, where I work, and the Gladstone Gallery, amongst others. So many, many congratulations. This is a massive achievement of a practice that is widely celebrated and admired. So how are you doing at this point in time? How is your family? How is it working at a distance with your team?
Well, I think everybody experiences a certain amount of stress and anxiety, and I am certainly no exception. Having said that, there is a little bit of a silver lining in working on Zoom. You get very close to people. I have never had such a nice time working with the teams in the office, because we now invite everybody to participate in meetings that in the past used to be just a couple of people. And because I can't draw, other people have to draw on the screen, and I say, no, move the cursor to the left. Maybe just up. And I've never been so aware of, saying west, east, north, south. And there is a kind of tenderness to it,
Yes.
That I really appreciate.
Yes.
Like, I sometimes feel like I'm in love with everybody I work with, and it's so good to see people and to see them be okay.
Yes. Well, it is. It's a time when people's barriers are down. It seems to me that the guard is not so up. So it means that that you can talk about more personal things that you wouldn't, I speak for myself, that I would never do normally. And when I say to somebody, how are you? I want to know. I don't want a kind of what I would call a blah, blah answer. It's like, how are you? And also I say, I'm much more frank, you know, how are you, Julia? Well, I'm okay, but you know, yesterday was really horrible and I've had a really difficult week. And then I go, oops, you know. But you are, where are you? Where are you now? Where are you speaking from?
Well, I'm on a quite remote island in Maine, and we have a house here. It's a very small island, and no people live here. So I really have been a bit of a hermit in 4 months now, and it's quite fantastic because it's sort of the opposite of all of the stress that that urban life brings with it. This complete unkempt nature of the Maine coast. It's extraordinary. I've never been anywhere where I have watched the seasons change.
But it sounds spectacular. But very different to you. You were brought up in Germany.
Right.
And you came to or went to the United States when you were 19. Can you
That's right.
still see elements of your upbringing being played out in the 40 years since you moved to the US?
Well, I think that's one of those funny things that when you get older, you realize how much you are the person that you were, that you became in the first 10 years of your life, right? I would like to think that I look very much the same, which might not be true. But absolutely, yeah, there's certain things that are simply very deeply ingrained in you. I don't know that they're just, I think this is a very interesting question because there are some things that we can learn. I think we can become conscious of an ethos, conscious of how we want to think. But then there is a whole host of that which you grew up with that you have very little control over or very little access to, maybe.
Yes. I mean, one of the things that I was fascinated to learn is that your grandmother founded an interior design studio in the 50s, which was continued by your father, who is a designer and architect. The company now makes furniture as well as hardware that complements your architecture, and you're also designing for it. So you grew up, it seems to me, in this architectural dynasty, which is amazing. So did your family educate you about the arts when you were growing up?
Well, they educated us about the arts, but it was just simply part of their lives. And I think that's, in a way, more important than anything. You can imagine that post-war Cologne, where I grew up, was a kind of interesting place. It was always a place where there were many artists, photographers, sculptors, and my parents were very much embedded in that group. I don't know if you remember, there was a gallery that was called Der Spiegel. And it was a very influential gallery, and artists like Hans Trier, Josef Fassbender were the closest friends of the family. And so as a little kid, we would go to openings, and there was a, if I say appreciation, that sounds so, I don't know, so official, but I think it was just simply a respect is really what it was for artists and the work they do. And
but you're incredibly fortunate, because my family were not involved in the arts, and I never went to an art, well, that's not true. I extremely rarely went to an art gallery with my father, which was the most exciting thing that I could possibly do. But often, this was on a Sunday afternoon, but often he preferred to have a nap rather than go to an art gallery. So many people might argue that was a good decision. However, you know, my fantasy of growing up in a in a family that was more culturally orientated is really significant. But since you've now devoted to the your life and work to really creating contexts for culture in a wide variety of ways, and there's a marvelous quote, which is, "At a time when architecture seems to be obsessed with grand gestures, the work of Annabelle Selldorf speaks to the transformative power of sculpting space in subtle and dignified ways," which was in the LA Times a couple of years ago. What is it about the quality of your work and your approach that makes you makes you the architect of choice?
Well, first of all, I think there are many people who think about what the context of art is in architecture, and I wish I was the only one, really. But well, I think the way I think about making spaces for art has something to do with how I would like to look at art myself. And I tend to think that there is a lot going on always in life. And so if you can create a situation of calm, and I like to say calm rather than using grand words like introspective or something, I really think that good art spaces allow the person viewing art to do that without interruption or without noise. We create our own noise in our heads.
Yes.
And so to take that away seems like a totally normal thing to do. In fact, I hear quotes like you just mentioned, and it embarrasses me a little bit because I feel that what I do is so normal. And it's when I was much younger, I was terribly worried that what I do is boring. And in a sense, it probably is. But I like that small realm in which you can do as little as possible, but enough to move the needle, if you know what I mean.
And do you think, because it's remarkable that in your practice there are 4 directors, I think, of which 3 are women, and architecture is not known to be supportive of women. You know, there's, I think of obviously Zaha, there is Amanda Levitt, Sejima, there are many others, but not so many. And so what is it about, do you think your sensibility is as much to do with being a woman? And why aren't there more women in architecture? Or am I out of date and this is really changing quite significantly now?
Well, I think it is changing. There are more women graduating from architecture school now than there are men. There are still smaller numbers of women who stay in the profession and who become licensed professionals. And I imagine that still has to do with family structure and architecture generally being a difficult profession to stick with. Why is it difficult? It's unbelievably time consuming. And you have to be immensely dedicated and sort of accept a process. And so people say your sensibility and blah, blah, blah. But the truth is you can't do anything alone, right? I mean,
no, of course not.
My ineptness when it comes to operating my iPhone, is testimony to that. But especially these days, I sort of marvel at how incredibly collaborative my team is. And in some ways, I think women are ready to be collaborative to begin with. They have less of a need and a desire to sort of say, well, I did this. And that it's marvelous to me if we sort of all work together and we resolve the things that need to be thought through. And you may have an idea. My ideas are usually very simple, but then everybody else puts them through the paces, and I just become a part of the team, and that's really a wonderful thing.
Well, I mean, this is a segue into teamwork, which is really how you and I first got to know each other, which is an exhibition I curated with Sharon Hecker, the Medard Rosso specialist at Galerie Tadeusz Ropak, where I work, on Medard Rosso in 2017. It was the first show that I did when I got there. And when Tadeusz said to me, did he think it would be possible? And I think we had something like 3 months, maybe 4, to organize it. And I said, oh, yes, no problem at all. I obviously didn't think it through, just thought it was exciting and the artist was wonderful. And then the reality, as realities always do, kind of unfold before your eyes. And there are moments where you think, oh, flipping Ada, what am I going to do now? And the installation for that particular show was very, very, I found particularly challenging. And I went to Tadeusz and I said, look, would you mind if I involved Annabelle Selldorf? And he said, well, of course, And I rang you and you were incredibly kind.
I was excited.
Well, thank you. And it was hard to display these absolutely extraordinarily intimate, tender, treasured objects, really, that required careful looking. And our mutual friend, our dear mutual friend, Hans-Ulrich Obrist, said about this show, this could never have been done in a museum. And the reason for that was because people could get really close to the sculpture. And also they could walk between sculptures, which weren't, and the space was not wide enough for a wheelchair, or it went against all the necessities, understandable necessities in many cases, of what is needed for an exhibition in a public space. But we had late night conversations. You were in Rome. You were doing, I think you were a residency at the, yes, which was incredible. And you amazingly took calls from me in the middle of the night, it seemed, and patiently together we worked it through, and ended up with this show, which was an enormous pleasure and a great project to work on. But I'm going to move on now to
I just want to say that it was such a journey, that show, no? Because and that is the thing that I love about working with art. You can't just start there and power through. It's like you have to sort of little by little find the rope, the leitmotif, the understanding of what it is all about. And in the end, Medardo Rosso, I think the show was so much inspired by what we saw of the images in his studio, and that was just fantastic.
Yes, well, thank you so much for being such a great collaborator. And what's so interesting, we're going from the smallest room in this beautiful building that you renovated and reconceived at Ely House in the middle of Mayfair, to this epic venture, which is Luma Arles, which I think has 6.5 hectares of master plan that you devised, 5 historic industrial structures, a hotel, a visitor centre, a cafe, dance studios and residences, artist residences. I mean, extraordinary. And this image makes me think of De Chirico. I've been there and I absolutely love the space. It's kind of as found almost, except you've made it as found, but better than as found. And then, of course, Luma Arles and the Frank Gehry project is then a whole other thing. And you're still, I think, working with Maya Hoffman and on this project. Is that correct?
Yeah, just a little bit. We're sort of, unfortunately, more or less at the tail end of things. And I always hope something will pop up and maybe I'll get to do more things because I miss Arles and I miss... It's not true that I devised the master plan. That was really sort of a group of us. But Maya was very kind to sort of pull me into the group. She has her core team, of which, of course, Hans Ulrich is one of the key people, Tom Eccles, Liam Gillick, Beatrix Roof, and what am I forgetting?
You're forgetting Nick at the National Portrait Gallery, I think, aren't you? No, maybe not.
No. Anyway, it doesn't matter. Point is that Maya has always talked about Luma being a kind of archipelago. And there are these beautiful early 20th century former railway buildings that kind of lend themselves to making open-ended exhibition space. And they're beautiful in and by themselves, but I will say that we had a lot of freedom to sort of make these spaces as sparse and as welcoming as possible. And you can see that in this funny image that there is this dark addition, which is making an exhibition space on the inside, a 20-meter wide space. There's a great deal of height. So what ensues is an amazing opportunity to sort of very freely sculpt the space for exhibitions, performances, or whatever you would do inside. And ultimately, I think it is really the dialogue between the landscape that's surrounding the space. The landscape architect is Bas Smeets, and then Frank Gehry's large building that is kind of on the boulevard, complemented by the sort of seriality of these industrial buildings. And working with that material and with this group of really wonderful people was fantastic. And I wish it never ended. I miss going there. I miss having these discussions, dialogues, conversations. And so it was great.
Yes, I mean, you feel it when you go there. You feel, or I should speak personally, I feel the possibilities. I love the scale.
Yeah.
And I think there's also something about, the new build for a place for showing art. When, if there's a big budget, then, they're going to be better door handles.
Right.
But in principle, there are certain givens. And actually the architect's room or the designer's room for negotiation is relatively small. And the thing about an existing building is that there is something to make. There's more of for me, there's more of a making in it. And so I love the fact that Ely House, where I work, has this incredible history. 18th, unbelievable, 18th century. But, the Serpentine, where I was director for 25 years, that was a building that existed before. Yes, we did, of course, commission Zaha to design, the other half of the apple, so to speak, a companion building, which was a new building. But there's something about the level of invention about existing structures that I relish. However, we're going to come on to a building, a new building, the Rubel building, and I'm going to show you an image, show everybody an image. And which you got the best review I've ever read for a building, a museum. So obviously you've found a way to actually master both, how to change an existing building but also make something new.
Well, I think that goes hand in hand. I think if you know how to change an existing building in a good way, you also know how to make a good new building. Having said that, the Rubel Museum is a pre-existing building, or rather a series of pre-existing warehouses where there formerly was a lot of warehouses essentially. And of course the Rubels are incredibly passionate about art. Yes. And we know each other for a long time, and had sort of established this kind of family relationship almost. And Mira, Don, and Jason, we would sit down together and go through the collection and sort of wander off talking about this artist or that opportunity or that exhibition. And they were so kind. They said, you know how to make spaces. And what I realized is it's not only the proportions and the light of certain spaces, but it is really how you circulate in the museum.
Yes.
And if I say it wasn't easy in this particular case, it really never is easy, because you have to have some kind of idea about what is agreeable for people to view art in. It can be very overwhelming, it can be intimidating, it can be too long, it can be too disruptive. And so I think what is really wonderful in this particular place is that we were able to establish like a central street from where you have these little side trips that you can take in a kind of loop. And so it allows you to take your own sweet time to feel that you are at ease with the choices that you make and where you go. But you can capture the entire thing, always orientate yourself with certain windows placed in such a way that you don't feel lost. And yeah, their collection, of course, is phenomenal and inspiring to the max, and it was just great to work with them.
I can imagine. Now, I need to keep a slight eye on the time, because obviously we could talk for 3 times the length and still not even get to the starting block. But I want to move on to this incredible project that you did in Africa, which it is the Mwabindo School. And you won the 2017 Panerai Design Miami Visionary Award for this project. So how did it come about? And I should think the experience was extraordinary, because how could it not be, in a way, with all the challenges that must have accompanied it? But do you have any plans to do anything similar in the future?
Well, as it turns out, we are continuing to work on this project, because we're building dormitories there and teachers' housing, and it's been a really wonderful experience in many different ways. First of all, learning about the country was marvelous, and then finding ways to do something that is at once simple and feels like it's not just how do you say, doesn't just come from the moon. We worked with compressive brick, so there's the local earth that is turned into the masonry structure for the classrooms, and that lends a kind of surface and atmosphere to the school that is very feels very much part of the place. And what's best about it is that it was all built by local people, and we introduced the technology, which isn't much of a technology. It's quite simple to produce this kind of brick. But we introduced this way of building to the local community, and that was a really satisfying thing to experience.
Of course.
And the school's doing very well. The children seem to really gravitate toward the open spaces. There are art spaces, there's a library, there's what you see in this picture, a big shade tent, because of course it gets very hot. And also there are these powerful monsoon downpours. And so there is a kind of community quality about the school that I think turned out very, very well.
But how exciting and how rewarding to do a project like that. However, there are also other wonderful projects which I hope that I can find. Yes, the Neue Galerie, and I want to show this picture of this beautiful staircase and also the staircase of Ely House, because I think it's a wonderful pairing that I hadn't really realized until I saw the images. But this is one of the grandest buildings in New York, and what you did there was extraordinary, because it's a sort of enfilade of rooms. It feels like it's an incredibly grand, but nevertheless it's a domestic space rather than a space purpose-built to show art. And yet it's a fantastic way to look at these beautiful objects that they have throughout it. So what was it like designing that, working on that project?
Again, I think it was what I love about this project when I think about it was the collaborative aspect of it. I learned so much from the group, the team that I worked with. Renee Price, who is the director, Ronald Lauder, of course, who is the benefactor, who has an incredibly precise eye and a really amazing sense of quality. And this house, this mansion by Carrere and Hastings, built in 1914, is one of those spaces that is, in a way, complete. And so inserting ourselves into this building was really, I mean, technically, in terms of constructability, very complicated, because we had to put a museum grade air conditioning system in there and sort of snake the ducts through the building in ways that were really rather complicated. But at the end of the day, I think that what is really fascinating is that this building was built at a moment when modernism took place. And so the simultaneous experience of art in the early 20th century with a building that is rather sort of French is really quite interesting, and I think inspires people to sort of make this leap. It's the first public building that I worked on, and I will say that it was hugely inspiring to me to see that work that we had conceived and executed, that I always thought, oh, nobody will pay attention to this or that detail, to realize and witness that people really were responding to the space.
Oh yes, I mean, how could you not? I mean, because what's so interesting about it is you walk in through the front door and you're immediately in their world, not in the world you've come from, not in the world of the street, but in their world. So they do this, or you did this, have done this brilliant thing of enabling us to inhabit the century of the building, but also engage in a very, very personal way with the art. It's partly to do with the scale, but it's also to do with that extraordinary collection, which is all of a piece. The experience, what I really want to say is the experience of going there is all of a piece. And you come out and then you're suddenly back in the real world. It's like, whoa, what happened there? You know, it's fantastic, absolutely fantastic, and very, very exciting. Now, I'm going to go from that to something really very, very different, which is, tell us what this is. Well, actually, I'm going to say it's the design. You've got the Public Design Commission Award for Sunset Park Material Recovery Facility, a processing centre for New York City's recyclables. And yet you took this, you had the same approach, it seemed to me, took the same care, the same focus to do this project, which actually almost nobody will see except those who work there, as you did.
That's not true. People go
okay.
all the time. It's really completely fascinating. Why were we interested in doing an infrastructural project in the first place? I don't know. I mean, I think that architects just want to do everything. And in a way, a public project like that, of course, is fascinating. It feels like you're doing something useful. And so when we won this competition, it was very clear that there wasn't much precedent for one such facility. And if you say that we took the same care, I think that is absolutely true. I think it is the same mindset of doing something in as simple but as sort of human-focused a way as is possible. And now, this facility, you go ahead.
Well, the thing is that I'm the timekeeper, so I can see these horrible minutes disappearing. And I really apologize for interrupting you. It's very bad practice, but I want you to know the question I'm going to answer afterwards, because I was fascinated to learn, and I hadn't realized that you worked with Massimiliano Giorni on the Venice Biennale, which in terms of control in the Venice Biennale, the reputation it has, and how to deal with that incredible experience must have been testing in the extreme. I mean, the Arsenale as a space is absolutely incredible. It's a promenade of 69,000 square feet, but I imagine it was really quite a tough, albeit very exciting thing to work on.
Yeah, it was totally exciting. I have gone to the Venice Art Biennale for so many years that I don't dare count them. And I always thought that the Arsenale is one of the most powerful architectural spaces in Venice. That grand basin is something that I can't begin to describe how much I love it. But the Corderia, as it is called, that place where ropes were made, which is why it is so long, and where ropes were laid out, is a very, very difficult space for art. There are these powerful columns, and there is this dark, tall space in the roof. And I always thought that what is difficult about it is you can only go straight through, and then you turn to the right and you turn to the left, and the circulation is kind of coercive in a sense. And working with Massimiliano, we tried to actually, again, really focus on the circulation and make these little side trips. I also thought that having some kind of light scrim on top of it in the sort of clear story of the space would give you a different experience of this sort of rather dark space. And in a sense, what was interesting to me is that it was weaving against the grain of the building, which is something I wouldn't usually think is the way to go about it. But by establishing a rhythm that was based on the exhibition rather than letting the building dictate how to negotiate it, I feel that we created these really beautiful experiences, not only with the art, but actually of the building itself. We slowed visitors down. They would find themselves enveloped in these installations, and I think it was quite successful.
It was incredibly successful. I mean, I remember that Biennale well, and as you say, it's such a particular experience. And although I've never been behind the scenes in the lead up to an opening, you hear horror stories about how you can't, how difficult it is to work there. But thank you for making that experience so life-enhancing, as indeed all your other projects. And I cannot thank you enough for getting up so early to come and have tea with me, and also for being so generous with your thoughts about all the projects you've worked on. And I wish we had more time. But I'm going to thank you and say, I hope we can find another project to work on. You've been a wonderful guest. Yes, with
I would
pleasure.
love that.
With pleasure. And I look forward to being in touch very soon. I'm now going to turn to the end note. So please feel free to leave or stay, whichever. And tell people that they can rewatch the 10 previous teas with Julia on our IGTV or YouTube channel. In the Panerai Gallery in Paris, following the success of Anthony Gormley's exhibition Inhabit, on 2nd of July, we shall open an exhibition of new work by Jules de Balancourt, entitled There Are More Eyes Than Leaves on the Trees. Dimensions of Reality, Female Minimal, is on display at our gallery in Pantin. Next Saturday at 11 o'clock, I will be having tea with Gilbert and George. During a career that has spanned over 50 years, Gilbert and George have worked together as one artist and enjoyed significant international recognition, creating more than 2,000 works of art. They've won numerous awards, including the Turner Prize in 1986, and have been honoured with many distinctions, including the title of Honorary Professor of Philosophy at London Metropolitan University. They represented the UK at the 51st International Venice Biennale in 2005. I very much look forward to seeing you all next Saturday at 11 o'clock, and thank you so much for joining us today. Goodbye.